Hello and welcome to GitLab Design Talks, specifically focused on collaboration today. And I'm here with Oritz and Fabian. And Fabian, maybe you can introduce yourself and then pass it over to Oritz.
Yeah, thanks for having us contribute to this. So my name is Fabian Zimmer. I'm the principal product manager for GitLab Geo. That's GitLab solution for distributed teams and for disaster recovery, and some backup stuff as well. So yeah, that's me.
Great. So my name is Orit, and I'm the senior product manager of the release stage, which is now the combined release stage. And that's just a little bit about me.
Nice. So we have two product managers on the line. I'm really excited. And I think to kick off, maybe it would be great to hear about your experience of collaboration at GitLab since joining, and maybe how that's differed from other companies that you've worked at previously. Anyone can take it.
All right, go for it. Oh, she leaves. Okay, I'll say something. Okay, so I think in my experience, and I was a bit shocked to be in a positive way when I started at GitLab. When I started, it was sort of 2 days before the Contribute conference in New Orleans, and it was all very exciting. But the first thing that I really noticed is that you can collaborate across the company essentially anywhere. It's encouraged and things are editable. So after a couple of days, we had a discussion, I think, about something in our product handbook, and somebody said, like, well, just open a merge request and maybe ping, I think it was Kenny and Josh on it, and then they'll have a discussion. And that was kind of my introduction to how folks at GitLab would engage. And that was really dramatically different to what I've experienced before, because I think that is true across the company. And we can talk about, my team and what I do, but I think at GitLab it's encouraged, and I think to some extent also expected to, collaborate with team members in different areas, and I think that's really wonderful. And I'm a little bit spoiled by now, because I feel you can approach any area and interact with whoever needs to be interacted with to get to a result, and that's, I think, generally possible. I've very rarely, almost never, encountered a situation where people refuse to collaborate because they thought you didn't have something valuable to contribute or anything. People are generally very open. So I think that is my first impression of GitLab, and I guess by now I'm pretty used to it, and I don't really think about it. But when I tell other friends of mine who work in different companies that you can, I don't know, go into the finance handbook and make a change, and then collaborate with whoever is responsible on that and explain it, and that's just fine. People are a little bit blown away. It's like, this is possible? Like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, so along those lines, I think I was also pleasantly surprised. GitLab is my first remote job, so collaboration, GitLab is doing a really nice job in it. I'm used to a work setting where not only do you need to go to actually physically to someone to get them to collaborate, you usually need to show them what's in it for them. And in GitLab, it's a little bit different. Everyone's just really happy to collaborate together. I think the fact that we have a single product and everyone understands that every effort that we do ultimately benefits our users, which are all the same regardless to whatever stage we're in, is also a different mindset in that sense. I also love the fact that besides that, you can collaborate with anyone inside the organization. So not only your team, cross stage, etc. You can also collaborate with the community, which is amazing. And it's a very unique experience to have all this insight and conversations with the actual users that use it on a day-to-day, And not only conversations, people contribute code and they contribute to our product to make it better. So I think that's a very, very unique situation in GitLab, and one that I am blown away at like every single day that I'm working here.
Yeah, I second that. I think community contributions are kind of magical. Sometimes folks come in and, you know, assign an issue to themselves and then start working on it because they feel it's important to them or they enjoy it, and there may be many different reasons for doing it. And as a product manager, I'm a little bit like, okay, that has not happened to me at a different company. And that's really really cool. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, this is sort of like a common theme that keeps on popping up in these discussions around collaboration, is that our values are like so drastically, our other values are so drastically related to collaboration. So you talked about before the fact that you can sort of create an MR and then everyone sort of collaborates and around that MR as they're reviewing it and so on. So the fact that results is sort of like, we have such a bias for action, and results ties into collaboration is such a big deal for us. And the fact that we're also working with an audience and that audience is participating, transparency and collaboration is huge. So it's really interesting, and it's something which I found quite unique as a team, like in the team context, but also as a designer, like designing with an audience is also really interesting. So yeah, totally agree. So I'd love to get both of your insight on how you feel collaboration between the different disciplines happens within GitLab. So how do your teams particularly collaborate when we have a setup of 6 to 8 engineers, 1 product manager, and 1 designer in each sort of feature team? How does that typically work within each of your teams? And we'll start with Orit.
Yeah, so I think within the team, there's still a sense of a team. So, you know, when we go into the agile aspect, every team member contributes to the team. So the discipline it's not that important. Everyone is working towards a common goal according to their skill sets. So I think that's very natural, also in the async setting. What I think is, you know, extra bonus points that we get from working at GitLab is the collaboration that we get from different teams, which may be due to the fact that we're dogfooding our own features. So we have another team working on our own features, asking or even contributing to a common goal that they need, and work to improve the product regardless to if it's released to users already. So I think the dogfooding aspect is super interesting and specific to GitLab. And also, again, because we're a single tool, our users don't really differentiate. They don't know what's in the release stage or what's in geo. Maybe they do, but but it's really, there's a lot of gray areas that could be considered any stage or multiple stages. So we get brought into a lot of conversations for other stages, and also to customer calls that may not be specific to our specific domain. So you also get a broader knowledge of what's going on in other teams and opportunities to collaborate together, which I think is really, really unique.
Nice, like a lot of T-shaped knowledge where you have a very specific set of expertise in one area, but also general expertise in the rest of the product as well. That makes a lot of sense. And I suppose within GitLab, we have an interesting balance when sort of how we prioritize work and the way that like the different trade-offs that we make in order to prioritize like the throughput and stuff that we have. So I wonder, we have while collaborating with other teams, often you can get lots of different information, lots of different perspectives, but sometimes that can also slow down the pace of implementation. So I wonder, how do you strike the right balance between collaborating across teams whilst maintaining throughput, efficiency, and sort of collaboration within your team?
It's a good question. I think one thing that helps is that I think collaboration in GitLab is you ask for people's input and their suggestions, and that is extremely valued. But GitLab does generally, and teams don't either, decide on consensus necessarily. I think if you need to move fast and you have a lot of input from different sources, because we have directly responsible individuals, people can still say, this is the way. And so I think that helps to keep us move fast, because we also iterate. That's easier to correct, right? It's like if you make a gigantic change, right, it's often the cost is really high of making a wrong call. But if you make small changes and small iterations, you can collaborate, and then you can make a decision, depending on where the decision is, and then actually move forward. And because you often try to make a minimal change, you can course correct and move into a different direction as well. But it can happen. I don't know if that's an experience that Uri shares, that sometimes things also require a lot of discussion, and because everything is async, you can't, if you, for example, in Geo, we have team members in Ukraine and in Brazil and on the West Coast in the US and on the East Coast and in Europe. And so synchronously, you need to wait a little bit, because otherwise you can't. And if you can't wait, you need to be transparent about that, because then maybe you can't actually have everybody's input, but that is quite rare in my experience. And so it sometimes takes a little while longer, but you still do get a lot of sort of asynchronous collaboration.
Yeah, I want to add on to that and in terms of how this affects priority and other things, it's not very different than what we as PMs have to deal with anyway, because we have so much information coming towards us in terms of functionality, what competitors are doing, some new emerging technologies that we need to do, market cases, macro things that the fact that it's cross-stage wouldn't necessarily affect its priority, but we as PMs have to be always in listening mode to know what's going on. And then we need to, look at all this information and then decide a priority. But it's better to know what you're juggling rather than not to know it. So it's another input.
It is true though, and I've experienced that with Geo. We are one product. And so sometimes you have very clear dependencies within or across stages. As in, Geo can do something because we are waiting for somebody else to do something first. And so there, obviously, you need to have a discussion about priorities and be very transparent on why another team is required to do something and how that affects your stage. And I think that is critical, because, and also in an ideal world, these dependencies are sometimes like you try to minimize them because it is harder to organize. And so ideally, a team is also able to make changes without having to rely too heavily on everything else, because then they can operate a little bit more independently as well. But that's not always a reality.
Nice. So you both sort of highlighted a little bit about our asynchronous working style there. And you talked a little bit about the challenges that sort of comes along with it. I'd love to know a little bit more about, what are some of the pros and cons that you've both found of working asynchronously and remotely at GitLab?
Sure, I'll start. So the pro is you can work, at any time that's convenient for you, and you don't have to be at a set hour. So it's really, really good to be flexible, especially during COVID. Another thing is that everything is written down. So if you're brought in late into the conversation, or this happens very often that issues move from one team to another, but it's like a 2-year-old issue, and it's really easy to catch up because everything is written down. So I think that's a huge advantage. I think the biggest con is the amount that nothing is immediate, and you need to wait until someone answers, and even if someone answers the next day, sometimes you're in the flow and you're focused and you just really need really quick answers. And in a regular office setting, you would just tap the person on the shoulder and say, hey, can you just help me out? I need something very small. So that's something we can't do asynchronously. And I think that's the biggest con. And sometimes things get too complicated to discuss asynchronous, and then you need to have a synchronous discussion. So not only did you pay the fine of waiting for the answer, you also, at the end of the day, need to follow up with the sync.
Yeah, I second that. I think there's also, the way I think about it is working synchronously or asynchronously is that sort of, they are tools to accomplishing some kind of result. And in, I think, many instances, people are used to working synchronously and think this is the only way to get to their result. But I think at GitLab, we're pretty good at having a bias for asynchronous work. But then in some instances, it is not the right way because you need to decide quickly, or it is too complicated, as Orit said. And then also knowing when not to work asynchronously is important. And I think that was a learning experience for me, because sometimes, at least in my team, that pops up. It's like, do we really need to, have a meeting about that? And often the answer is no. But sometimes it's also just easier to, look at this gigantic hairball and talk with each other for 15 minutes and get onto the same page. But that is sometimes just tricky because of time zone differences. So if that happens, for example, for me with a team member that is 12 hours ahead of me, then all of a sudden you're looking at really odd times. So that can be a challenge. And I think there, again, having some consensus and a good understanding of how to approach those things in your team is important. And also, I think we say this often, assume positive intent. Sometimes somebody may not, be in the right mindset for various reasons that have nothing to do with it, and having a quick meeting can really, get you on the same page quicker. And that's context that's not so apparent in written statements. And yeah, the one thing that you mentioned, or that where I think I agree that everything is written down, but if you don't sort this correctly and you don't synthesize the information, I sometimes come to issues and they are very long when there's discussions upon discussions, and then actually knowing where things are at can also be tricky, because all of our asynchronous communications and discussions and community contributions and whatnot, nothing is lost. So it's all there, and it can be a little bit overwhelming at times.
I think that's
Maybe we should have a feature to archive some stuff. Just press the button.
Yeah, we had that. Yeah, we had that discussion recently in the product team as to when to close issues.
No, but not a full issue, just the discussion part.
Just the discussion, archive it. That's a good feature suggestion. You should file an issue.
Yeah. So I think those are really interesting points. Like async by default, but not always having to rely on async, I think is really important. And then also there's like a certain responsibility and discipline that comes from communicating asynchronously with the huge volume of content that's being produced. I think individuals have a responsibility to not only think about how they're communicating, but also summarizing and synthesizing some of the information as they're going along as well, because some of these threads can become pages long. So yeah, really great points. I'd love to we've got a few minutes left. I'd love to just ask you both around a little bit more about collaboration with design. So where are the typical sticking points that you feel you see between PMs and design collaborating in our context, and maybe what are some of the opportunities that we have to improve upon those?
Okay, I can go first. So this is maybe a boring answer, but I am blessed, or Gio is blessed, with an amazing product designer, Sinjung, and we collaborate very regularly with each other. We have a bit of an advantage because we're also in the same time zone, so often we have a coffee chat in the morning, and I love working with her. And I think having a designer on the team makes a huge difference for your product development. And I think one thing that I think is important, and that may be something also to sort of as an improvement. I think sometimes we have a too narrow definition of what design means, right? It's like the designer, like creates our user interface and that's kind of it, and they deal with pajama issues. But I think we're learning and getting also better at saying, well, designing, means really to define the user experience that you're looking for, right? And that has to do with how the product feels, right? How certain flows work, right? It's not only the graphical user interface, it's the entire experience. And I think getting that perspective in sort of every aspect of what we do is really valuable. And I think designers can bring that to the table. And if they feel empowered to contribute and collaborate, not only on sort of what you may perceive as the standard design problems, but in other areas as well, I think that's hugely valuable. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, so I agree with Fabian. I think having a designer on the team is really important for everything. I'm currently in between designers, so I can tell you on the flip side. I think product designers and product management is a partnership. I think that no issue is complete without the input of both the PM and the PD. It's super important. It's a little bit more challenging at GitLab, this relationship, because yes, there's a lot of virtual ways to do this, but in the past, when you just go into a room and start writing on a whiteboard and just like hacking away at something, it's very short. And the asynchronous aspect is more challenging, and it takes longer to understand what the other person meant. I had this experience when I joined GitLab. I went to co-working day in the Netherlands, and Hayana was my designer at the time. And we sat down in that co-working day, and in like 2 hours, we sat together. We hashed out what would take us at least 3 weeks asynchronous to do, and like it was amazing. So I think that's a challenge and an opportunity that we still need to figure out, because the design stage does take longer than it would in an office setting. But I would never give up on this experience. I think the designers have a really great view. Another thing that the design team itself has lots of meetings where they bounce off ideas off each other. So they bring in all this knowledge from other stages that I, as a PM, don't have when looking at my stage. And they have just really, really great ideas. So that's like a really great opportunity to collaborate and to bring in also opportunities for cross-stage collaboration as well. I think we should have more of that. I don't know if there's a good way yet, because the synchronous meetings are never good for everyone in time zones, but I think if we can get that's an opportunity to find something to get that better. But yeah, I think the designers at GitLab are amazing. I think they do an amazing job.
Nice. And a little sneaky tip as well. We have a Slack channel called UX Co-working, and you can post little design problems there, and you'll get the perspective of any designer there. And then you can also like spin up a quick Zoom meeting as well if you want to make it synchronous. So that's a little tip. And we have 2 minutes left, so I'd love to hear just if you have any advice for new people joining GitLab on things to consider around our value of collaboration.
I think anyone who joins GitLab needs to know that they can reach out for help for anyone in the organization to get a better understanding of anything. I think that's just the tip. Don't hesitate to reach out and ask for help, especially when you're starting. Everything is so overwhelming. There's so much to learn in the culture and the product, and it's huge. So just, have a comfortable setting and have a team to have your back.
Yeah, there's not much to add. I think take it one step at a time. It's going to be very, very overwhelming at the beginning, but everybody is helpful. And also if you feel that you can make a contribution and improve something wherever it is, just do it. You know, don't feel like you don't have enough knowledge or you're unsure. There's likely going to be some discussion and collaboration on it. It may or may not happen, but definitely just do it. I think that's what I would say, because that's what I think that is really what makes GitLab special, that everybody can contribute. So I would encourage you to do that.
Wonderful words to finish on. Orit and Fabian, thank you very much for your time. I've had a great time. See you later.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.